I think when you look at businesses and you look at the world that we're in, and maybe you look at the mental health areas, those two paths don't cross very often. And sometimes a lot of employers don't want those paths to cross, or maybe the mental health agencies don't, but it's a natural fit.
When I sat down with employers, I was, first of all, amazed at how little they knew about the services that we provide. And when I began to list the alcohol and drug programs that we had, early intervention programs, mental health programs, and then told them how their employees could take advantage of those programs with no cost to them. They couldn't believe that all this was here all this time and they didn't know about it.
So we've got a population that is at risk. We also have a population that's unemployable, and some of that population are in those circumstances because of excessive drug and alcohol use. If we could have ADAM boards, if we can have our communities, if we can have our mental health systems be able to get individuals back to an employable state, we, again, economically could flourish. Our businesses and our communities are a source of great energy, great talent, great skills, whatever it is that they do to make money and put more taxes into the system. Individuals who get an opportunity to have tax resources in their hands, I would love for them to really look at business as a partner with them. Figure out how we can help each other, because the ultimate bottom line is, in order for us to stay healthy and viable as an economic base to raise our families, our communities have to be clean and sober.
I believe that business is a partner in this whole issue of substance abuse, because businesses drive the economy. The businesses need workers. The workers bring home money, they spend money in the stores. The workers own homes, they pay taxes. And so when we can get the businesses to help the employees understand the whole issue of how the drug-free workplace programs are not just there to stop you from doing something wrong, it also helps you to have maintain a better lifestyle.
I think that being a substance-free workplace changes the norms and the culture as for a company, because once you go through the training and once you've been a part of it for a while, you can almost visibly see it. And then they start reaching out to you more as the employer or as the HR representative to say, I've got this going on. Do you know how I could find help, or do you have anybody that you would recommend, or who would you reach out to for this? So that's where that culture shift is. They're not afraid then to ask, because that stigma is somewhat gone.
Business gives us access to employees, supervisors, and even families to talk a little bit about drugs, prevention of drug abuse, and an opportunity for us to really solidify a workforce that is competent and available. I think that's the biggest challenge all of us have. One of the questions that employers ask me is, how can I help employees who fail a drug screen? That's a new question, and it's an area that we're not that comfortable with right yet.
We help a lot of people get jobs. We have 18 different offices in Northwest Ohio. Last year we had about 7,000 people that we employed at 250 companies, again in Northwest Ohio. Mike was hearing a lot of stories about companies needing employees, and they couldn't find them because too many of them were drug tested and they failed the drug test. So one day he came to our office and he said, tell me about this with Spirion. Are you experiencing this same problem? And I said, oh my goodness, yes, this is a huge problem. Drug testing, we eliminate 50% of the people sometimes. So Mike knew this was a real opportunity.
The business community hasn't been as easy to talk to, partly because we haven't found, in the past, we haven't found kind of a niche for us with them. We've been doing we call it We Care at Work, but it's a drug-free workplace program in Allen, Auglaize, and Hardin counties for about 3 years. So I went to each Chamber of Commerce and I explained to them the program, and within 10 minutes, all the chambers said, no, this is a big problem. They were all willing to get on board. For the most part, it was a half an hour meet with the business owner and the HR director, and about 20 minutes into it, they got it. Sit down for a half an hour and talk about services available and how a drug-free workplace program can not only help them retain and hire employees, but also help us keep people drug-free, keep them with their families, and keep them on the job. Now I had an employer, the HR person, and probably other people on the staff or employees who now saw the mental health board and our programs as a benefit to them. So it was almost like, oh, so this is why we vote for your levy. They saw me as an asset. If I can get an employee into treatment early, I have 100% better chance of returning them to the workplace drug-free than if they get fired, get passed on to another employer who then fires them, and they never get treatment. I divert all these people from a criminal justice system. So for each one of those employers, there's 20 to 50 employees. Each one of those employees, many of them have a family. So now we're impacting that person's family. So add another 4 or 5 people onto that, and just in that one employer. I don't think I'll ever really know the impact that this is going to have.
Being a drug-free workplace has changed our culture in that the thought, again, that we would ever need it was very remote in most of our minds. I'm talking about, myself as the executive director, our board of directors. It just wasn't even something that anyone thought about. But then once we did, and then within 2 days we had this issue, it really made all of us think a lot about it. So we're realizing that we are in a community that does have issues.
Good help is hard to find. A person tests positive doesn't mean that they are a bad person. They've got issues. There could be issues at home. You got domestic issues, financial issues, other health issues that are impacting their lives, and yet they have a valuable skill. If we can get that gentleman or that lady to get manage that, then they can return to work and continue to be productive in society, continue to provide for their families, be that stable influence in their home.
We found out that 70% of our workforce was using at some point, whether recreationally, daily, and we actually had a couple people selling, and sometimes selling on the floor. We anticipated losing a lot of employees because of incorporating the new program, but honestly, a lot of them just stepped up to the plate. We have a lot of employees who have been here a significant amount of time, and I think there was a handful of employees too that wanted to see the change, that were concerned about the problem that was in the plant. And that's one of the big things we noticed too, is that our productivity turned around. Our role as an employer within the whole mess of drugs is just as important as the parent. So as an employer, you're handling these people 8 hours a day, sometimes longer, 5 days a week. You've got to make the impact, you've got to influence them, and you've got to support.
One of the things we noticed about the prescription drug issue was that some of the employees, and probably me included, at some point or another, innocently had misused prescription drugs. Innocently, but illegally. Somebody would give their prescription drug to a family member. they've got a headache or a bad pain, and they say, well, here, why don't you take one of these and see if this works? They were doing it. Sometimes they were doing it because they didn't have other medical access to medical care, and so they would, give a friend or a relative their medication. Again, not trying to get high, but just trying to get through the day. We hope that our training at work does filter back home. We arm them with that information and tell them to be careful, be conscious, especially the issue about the prescription drugs, because there's a lot of families that share medicines.
So there's a business case for businesses to have great drug-free workplaces that also reach and kind of tentacle out beyond that to be able to be a community resource for their employees.
One of the things we noticed about the prescription drug issue was that some of the employees, and probably me included, at some point or another, innocently had misused prescription drugs. Innocently, but illegally. Somebody would give their prescription drug to a family member. They've got a headache or a bad pain, and they say, well, here, why don't you take one of these and see if this works? They were doing it. Sometimes they were doing it because they didn't have other medical access to medical care, and so they would, give a friend or a relative their medication. Again, not trying to get high, but just trying to get through the day. The cost of bringing the employees in it's the cost of doing business. We have to furnish safety glasses, and we have to have hard hats, and we have to make sure that they have seat belts on in the trucks. It's part of the safety culture of the company.
Within our Restore on any given day, we may have volunteers from Job and Family Services that are helping to earn their food assistance. We may have community service volunteers from the court system who may have had they may even have drug convictions. So this has really been helpful for us to have this policy in place so that, if we run into issues with any of those folks, we know what to do.
I don't think people know that the services are out there. I just don't think that they're aware of it. With the training that we give our employees, if they have a child or if they have someone else in their family that has an issue like this, they have a resource. They know of a resource that they can go to. One of the things that scares the dickens out of me right now is this medical marijuana thing and how we're going to deal with that with, all the sensitive areas that I have in my business. Driving trucks, I'm held liable for that. So this drug-free work program that we're on addresses that on a continuous basis.
Maybe prevented kids from getting involved in substance abuse in school because dad came home or mom came home and talked about what they learned at work. There's a mutual benefit. If you're able to retain a good employee who's maybe made a mistake or maybe has a problem you didn't even know existed, how much less will you have to pay to recruit, hire, train, and get a new employee in place?
Our employee training includes information about how they themselves can be substance-free, but also, in my opinion, equally or maybe more important, how they can be a resource to friends, family, neighbors who are in situations where they may have someone at risk. Our employees who are knowledgeable about where helping resources are, we take and carve out a piece of every single annual training program for employees and really key on something important or urgent about what's happening out there in the community. One year we had a panel presentation because a lot of people said, well, I don't know what drug treatment could be.
It's amazing to me, having done this for 15 years, where you send out those invites and you're like, okay, it's time for substance-free workplace training. They kind of get jazzed because they realize, oh, it's going to be a different topic. What are we learning about this year, Angie? It's a serious subject, but people start to respect and understand why, what's the methodology behind putting this policy in place. It's not to invade their personal privacy. It's really, you're doing it because you care about them and you're trying to make them better and even provide them information for their kids. I mean, there's all sorts of things that they learn and they take and go back and like, wow, I didn't realize that was an option for me with my kids to sign up for these email alerts, or I didn't know that drug was going by that name, or if my kid texted this, that I need to be worried. I mean, they don't know, and I can't tell you how many times we always walk out of those training classes going, huh, and you can apply it not only professionally, but in your personal life as well.
Maybe prevented kids from getting involved in substance abuse in school because dad came home or mom came home and talked about what they learned at work. There's a mutual benefit. If you're able to retain a good employee who's maybe made a mistake or maybe has a problem you didn't even know existed, how much less will you have to pay to recruit, hire, train, and get a new employee in place?
I don't think people know that the services are out there. I just don't think that they're aware of it. With the training that we give our employees, if they have a child or if they have someone else in their family that has an issue like this, they have a resource, they know of a resource that they can go to. One of the things that scares the dickens out of me right now is this medical marijuana thing and how we're going to deal with that with, all the sensitive areas that I have in my business. Driving trucks, I'm held liable for that. So this drug-free work program that we're on addresses that on a continuous basis.
I think one of the most useful classes was just in the last few years when Jim Ryan came. And I specifically asked him to speak about alcohol because, as I said, I know it's the drug of choice at Spillman. And I'd never really understood before that alcoholism, with the more you consume, the more your body tolerates the alcohol. Alcohol is really an illness. I think I'd heard it before, but you and Karen explained it so clearly that it's an illness. And drugs really are the same. We make mistakes, we shoot up, we drink too much, and it becomes a pleasurable habit, and then it becomes an addiction. And it's something that, without help, most people can't fight.
So there's a business case for businesses to have great drug-free workplaces that also reach and kind of tentacle out beyond that to be able to be a community resource for their employees.
I think that as far as the cost goes, I think if you get rid of that problem and not the person, it makes more sense long-term and it's the better cost savings for the company moving forward.
We'll actually offer help and assistance to the potential employee. Even if they're not our employee yet, it still gives them a chance to maybe seek help and better themselves and ultimately help our community. An employee comes to us and applies, and we find out that they are testing positive for drugs. Our old policy didn't allow us much leeway. It was, you're not getting a job. Now, with the new Working Partners program, we can actually refer them and help them. And so they're just not being bumped down the line or trickled down the line to the next employer who doesn't drug test. And I think we're actually stopping those people in our community from maybe even abusing drugs or continuing on the abuse.
We've chosen not to throw somebody out of our employment if they test positive because it's so hard to get good employees today. And it costs us an awful lot less money if we can keep an employee instead of trying to retrain an employee. So it's a lot less expensive for us to give them a second chance than to go train a new employee. We've had real good success with it. I'd say I'd say we've had close to, if not 100% success in doing this.
Well, one of our associates actually tested positive for marijuana after he was assessed. They recommended classes through the community. He came back clean and he's never tested positive since. And he's now not just a worker in production, but he now does quality control for Spillman. A man who's probably been with us 15 years. He too had trouble with alcohol. He's been clean now and he gave up tobacco too. Been clean it's been at least 3 years.
And it starts from the very beginning. Yes, you are going to have to take a drug test. From that, if they fail that drug test, we will refer them on to different help. And that's where the relationship that we have with Mike and many other We Care facilities and organizations has been huge. We give a person a second chance. They can come back with no problem and get a job. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
The earlier I get somebody into treatment, the more successful I'm going to be. A parent who goes and talks to their child about drugs, that child is 50% less likely to use. I'm less likely to see that person in our treatment programs. So there's a cost benefit to the community, there's a cost benefit to the business, and there's a huge cost benefit to the mental health and recovery services in our communities.
In order for us to have our workplace at Elford have drug and alcohol-free sort of DNA, is one that everybody understands there's a business case for it. I believe that with communication, with this collaboration instead of competition between the resource groups, that we actually could get drug and alcohol-free DNA infused throughout Ohio, and that would help all of us flourish.